Part C deals with an introduction to sexual reproduction, and Part D is a discussion of the male reproductive system. This section includes some general information comparing the male and the female. The male anatomy includes primary sex organs. These are the gonads. Testes, they contain seminiferous tubules, and they carry out a process called spermatogenesis to produce the sperm. They also contain secondary sex organs. The scrotum is the sac containing the testes, penis to insert the sperm into the female, various ducts to store and transport sperm, and glands producing various fluids. In the female, she has primary sex organs, gonads, the ovaries. The ovaries contain sac-like structures called follicles, and they carry out a process called oogenesis, the production of eggs. The follicles degenerate into a structure called a corpus luteum. We'll have more to say about this. The female contains secondary sex organs like the uterine or fallopian tubes, the uterus, and the vagina. Let's look at sexual reproduction once again. Gametes are produced by primary sex organs, the ovaries and testes. Sperm are small, motile, with a head containing the nucleus, an acrosome, a middle piece with mitochondria, and a tail, flagellum. The tail is for locomotion. The middle piece with the mitochondria supplies energy, and of course the head has the nucleus in it. Eggs, on the other hand, are large and non-motile, and they contain yolk, a food material for the embryo. A chicken egg is a single cell with a lot of yolk because the chick, before hatching, needs a lot of food. Here is an egg surrounded by sperm to give you an idea, a perspective of the comparative sizes. Fertilization is internal in the female reproductive system and requires an organ, the penis, to insert the sperm in the female. Gametogenesis is the creation of gametes. The cells involved in gametogenesis are the germ cells. Germ cells originate in the yolk sac of the embryo. At 40 to 48 days in embryonic development, they migrate to the primary gonads. It involves two processes, growth and meiosis, first and second meiotic divisions. In spermatogenesis, each spermatogonium results in the production of 4 sperm by way of the 2 meiotic divisions. Cytoplasmic division is divided evenly. In oogenesis, each oogonium produces 1 egg plus 3 polar bodies. In the case of oogenesis, cytoplasmic division is unequal. Most of the cytoplasm remains with the developing egg cell. Spermatogenesis occurs in the testes and continues throughout the reproductive lifetime of the male. It begins with spermatogonia, continually multiplying. They develop into primary spermatocytes, and these undergo the first meiotic division to form secondary spermatocytes. Second meiotic division occurs to create spermatids, and then another period of growth forms the mature sperm. Oogenesis is more complex, as you'll see. We'll discuss this when we get to the female reproductive processes. Let's look at hormonal control. The hypothalamus, recall, secretes gonadotropin-releasing hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary, its target, to release gonadotropins. These are FSH and LH. For the moment, I'm not telling you what those abbreviations mean. In the male, FSH targets the seminiferous tubules. and they produce sperm. And LH targets the interstitial cells. You'll understand what they are shortly. And they produce testosterone, a male sex hormone. Testosterone stimulates the development and maintenance of male sex characteristics. In the female, FSH targets the follicles, and so FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. Follicles produce eggs and secrete estrogens. LH, on the other hand, targets the corpus luteum, and so LH stands for luteinizing hormone. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone. Estrogens stimulate the development and maintenance of the female sex characteristic. Puberty is the period from the first secretion of gonadotropins, LH and FSH, to the first ejaculation of living sperm, and the first ovulation in the female. Secondary sex characteristics are developing roughly between ages 10 to 17. Adolescence includes puberty to adulthood, the age at which a person is capable of reproducing. This is adolescence. Let's progress to the male. The gross anatomy of the male includes the penis, it's part of the urinary and the reproductive system, testes, where sperm is produced, the scrotum, the sac in which the testes are located, and the urinary bladder, the storage sac for urine. The ureter is the tube draining urine from the kidneys to the urinary bladder, and the urethra is the tube draining urine to the outside of the body. The scrotum itself contains the testes. It contains cremaster muscles. These are skeletal muscles to raise and lower the testes to help regulate the temperature of the testes. If raised closer to the body, the testes are a little warmer, and if lowered away from the body, the testes are cooler. It turns out that sperm needs a very narrow range of temperature for development. It can't be too hot. The dartus muscle is smooth muscle to wrinkle the scrotal skin. This also helps to conserve heat. The testes produce sperm. They're sensitive to changes in temperature. They develop in the abdomen of the embryo and descend into the scrotal sac around the time of birth through a canal called the inguinal canal. Peritoneum, which is an inner lining of the abdomen, bulges downward, guided by the gubernaculum, the fibromuscular cord that pulls the testes into the scrotum. Blood flows from the aorta into the testicular artery through vessels within the testes and then out through the testicular vein. The artery and the vein form a close network to become something called the pampiniform plexus. The plexus transfers heat from the testicular artery to the testicular vein by the process of countercurrent exchange. This will be described in the kidney unit. It prevents the temperature from rising too high. Internally, the testes contain seminiferous tubules. They produce the sperm. Each one is almost 3 feet long for a total of something like 800 feet. They're contained within lobules separated by septa. Interstitial cells of Leydig, are found between the tubules and they secrete testosterone. The cells of the wall of the seminiferous tubule are called Sertoli, or sustanticular cells. They function by serving as a barrier between blood and the lumen of the tubules, and it's called the blood-testis barrier. It provides nutrients, secretes antigen-binding proteins, and inhibin. Germ cells are embedded in the edges of the Sertoli cells. As sperm mature, they progress toward the lumen of the tubule. Ducts can show the path of the sperm. They arise, as we said, in the seminiferous tubules. They travel through smaller tubules called the rete testis, and then through the efferent ducts or tubules. From there, sperm flows through the epididymis, which is a coiled arrangement of tubes, and then out through the ductus or vas deferens. The vas deferens becomes a short ejaculatory duct before it joins the urethra. The urethra is guarded by an internal urethral sphincter at the bladder. This contracts during sexual intercourse to prevent urine from exiting the urinary bladder. A vasectomy is cutting the vas deferens to prevent sperm from passing through to the outside, and it's used as a common contraceptive. Glands of the male reproductive system. They produce a fluid called semen, or seminal fluid, because semen actually is seminal fluid plus sperm. The fluid provides nutrients, a lubricant. It's slightly basic, pH of about 7.5, and it's produced by seminal vesicles. These are about 2 inches long. The fluid they secrete contains fructose, clotting proteins, prostaglandins. About 60% of the volume of the seminal fluid is from the seminal vesicles. Prostate gland, about the size of a golf ball, secretes enzymes, including one called serine protease, also called prostate-specific antigen, PSA. It also secretes lipids, calcium ions, antimicrobial substances, and it makes up about 25% of the volume. The Cowpers, or bulbourethral glands, secrete mucus mainly. Mucus is also secreted from the walls of the urethra. During sexual intercourse, the clotting enzymes activate a sticky substance that prevents semen from washing back out the vagina. Prostaglandins stimulate reverse peristalsis in the uterus and the fallopian tube, which help to draw the sperm into the female reproductive tract. Let's look at hormonal control in a little more detail. The seminiferous tubules produce sperm. The sustanticular cells secrete antigen-binding protein, ABP, and it binds to testosterone to stimulate sperm production. The interstitial cells secrete testosterone. Now, testosterone has a number of functions. One is a negative feedback function to inhibit FSH and LH secretion. Another is to stimulate the development and maintenance of male sex characteristics. This includes greater strength, greater muscle mass, and other male characteristics. Some athletes take steroids, intending to build their muscle mass and their ability in the athletic field. One problem with taking steroids is they also play a negative feedback work, inhibiting the FSH and the LH. And as a result, since those hormones maintain this male sex characteristics, penis and other parts begin to shrink. It's not wise to take steroids. Other functions of testosterone include stimulating sperm production and increasing protein synthesis. Penis is involved in reproduction, obviously. In order for reproduction to succeed, sperm must be deposited in the female reproductive tract. Penis becomes erect when erectile tissue is filled with blood. Erectile tissue includes the corpora cavernosum. These are paired bands of erectile tissue. They extend into the pelvic area as the crus. There's also the corpus spongiosum. This is a single band of erectile tissue, and it surrounds the urethra. Erectile tissue contains lacunae, that is, blood-filled spaces, and trabeculae, partitions of connective tissue and smooth muscle. Blood supply in order of flow includes from the internal iliac artery into the deep artery and dorsal arteries of the penis, through the lacunae in the erectile tissue, and out dorsal veins. During sexual intercourse, several phases occur. The excitement phase is an erection of the penis and the clitoris in the female, because these are homologous organs. This is due to increased parasympathetic nervous activity. Visual and mental input and stimulation of genital organs leads to parasympathetic output by the pelvic nerves to arteries in the penis, causing the smooth muscle in the wall of the artery to relax. This is under the action of nitric oxide released from the endothelial cells of the vessels. Nitric oxide, as I mentioned, causes the smooth muscle to relax and dilate the arteries of the penis. We'll come back to this idea when we get to the control of blood flow in a later unit. Blood flow, therefore, increases through the deep artery of the penis into the erectile tissue, and the erectile tissue expands with blood. The exit veins are compressed to decrease venous outflow, and this maintains the erection. Signals involved in the erection were initiated by nitric oxide, which act by a fairly complex pathway. It involves the nitric oxide acting on an inactive form of guanylate cyclase, which activates it. The active form then acts on guanosine triphosphate, GPP, to activate it into a cyclic guanosine monophosphate, cyclic GMP. This substance, in turn, relaxes the smooth muscle in the wall of the blood vessels, and that then increases the blood flow because the vessels dilate, and that maintains the erection. To end the erection, the cyclic guanosine monophosphate has to be degraded. That happens through the action of an enzyme called phosphodiesterase. Viagra and other similar substances inhibit this enzyme. Therefore, the signals initiated by the nitric oxide remain in place and the erection is maintained. Impotence is a failure to achieve an erection. Orgasm is due to increased sympathetic nervous system activity. Somatic motor neurons cause widespread skeletal muscle contraction in the pelvic region. Sympathetic stimulation of reproductive organs occurs, including contraction of the glands and the vas deferens. Pleasurable sensation is involved. The internal urethral sphincter contracts to prevent urine from exiting the urinary bladder. Ejaculation is the release of semen. It averages 3 to 5 milliliters. Contraction of smooth muscle in the glands and skeletal muscle in the pelvic floor expel the seminal fluid. It contains roughly 400 million sperm. Less than 60 million may result in infertility. There involves increased heart rate and respiratory rate. And that's a look at parts C and D. You're now ready to progress to part E, a discussion of the female reproductive system.